Welcome back to the Present Father M46. I'm about to share with you the amazing true story of how my two children got their names. So my wife and I got married April 12, 2009. I moved her into the home that I was living in. The first thing that you naturally think about when you get married, having children, having kids. To be honest with you, I was I was scared. I was very fearful. She was too. Probably the worst thing you could do when you want to plan anything for the future is to spend countless hours watching the news. And I did that. Fox and CNN, I watched all of it. It's all bad news, it's just it just can mess you up psychologically. And then on top of that, I would get on the internet, look at all these videos about like California is going to fall off the map in this coming date. The end is coming on this day. Just some wild stuff. Just as a believer, without even having to watch the news, you look at our country and you see the moral decay. You just got to think to yourself, like, how long is God gonna let this go on before he smashes on this country? Threats of terrorism are in the back of our minds, and weird weather patterns that were happening, the threats of economic collapse, recession, depression, active shooters, school shootings. All these things were just really taking a toll on my wife and I, making us think maybe we should just not have any children. It would be very difficult to raise up a child in a world that's this crazy. But one day, I remember we were in the living room. We're in a little Bible study. We would have our little studies. We're in the book of Exodus. Now, for some of you that don't know, in the book of Exodus, that's where God is dealing with the Egyptian Pharaoh. He's bringing judgment on Egypt because they won't let the Hebrew slaves go free. So God starts to bring a series of judgments upon Egypt and the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh will continue to harden his heart. Moses would continually go before the Pharaoh and tell him to let God's people go so that they could worship him freely. The Hebrew slaves that dwelt in Egypt were actually in a district called Goshen. And in this land of Goshen, none of those judgments, those 10 judgments that God had brought upon the Egyptians ever affected the Hebrew slaves in the land of Goshen. So this place was a land of refuge and protection. We read about this, and my wife and I were inspired by it. We had this idea of naming a child, a son, naming him Goshen. Both agreed that that's a strong name and it has so much meaning in it. If we ever do have a child, we'll name him Goshen, because our child will know that no matter what he sees in his life, no matter what kind of destruction, judgments, whatever kind of craziness the world has to offer around him, he'll know that God is his refuge and his protection. God is his shield and his fortress. It wasn't much longer after my wife and I got married. I think we were able to stay in our home for 5 or 6 months before trouble came to our house. I was fired from my job. We had to short sale our home. Here I am trying to be a man, and I can't be the breadwinner. I can't keep a roof over my wife's head, and we're just married. It was a very difficult time. I got fired from my job being falsely accused, and I'll talk about that more in another video. The things that I feared most had just hit our home. We moved to a small apartment complex called Colonial Gardens. We went and talked to the manager of the complex, and I told her my whole story. Well, this woman happened to be a believer. Her name was Pam. Pam was a strong little Christian woman, and she said, you know what, even though you don't have a job, you shouldn't be able to get in here. She said, I feel good about you two, and I'm gonna give you a unit. Sure enough, we moved into unit number 26. It was just a provision of God. God made a way. I remember one day, it was such a relief when I witnessed this. We go out to the back balcony. We lived on the upper floor. There's these wooden posts in the back balcony. God is so amazing. You see, most of the units, there's about 98 units at Colonial Gardens. Most of them had these 4x4 posts painted white. And so they're going through the process of painting and restoring some of these posts. Ours was maybe one of 3 that still hadn't been painted. And I look on the left post, I see some print, and written on that post is Goshen. It's his name, Goshen, is written there. No lie. What are the odds that this name would be written on this post, that we get into this apartment that we shouldn't even got into, that this one unit would not have its post painted, and we would think of a name for a boy so rare. It's hard for me to believe that God did not orchestrate this, that he wasn't directly responsible for this and wasn't showing us that he's hearing our prayers. Odds are just too slim. I knew from then, and I told my wife, that this is the place where Goshen's going to be born. It was going to be like a new beginning for us. And it was God reminding me that he's still our refuge and our protection. He's still watching out over us. Things would get difficult. Things would get very hard, not having a job and losing our home. And he was reminding me that I haven't left you. I'm still your protection. I'm still your strong tower, your fortress. I'm your refuge. I've heard your desire for a son. Don't worry about what's in the world. You just need to raise me up some offspring. I'll take care of the child. That was my directive, my orders. Knew for sure that we were gonna have a boy. So when Susie gets pregnant, our first 2 ultrasounds, we're told that it was a girl. We went in for the 3rd ultrasound. The word of the Lord was confirmed. On February 24th of 2011, roughly 2 years later, after moving into Unit 26 at Colonial Gardens, where my son's name was stamped on the post, the world was introduced to my firstborn son, Goshen.